My wife slept with my best friend and then stole $250, $0 from our joint account to run away with him. Now she's claiming I'm the one who's wrong in the divorce court. Hello, everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. Honestly, I thought I knew everything about my wife, Lisa. We'd been married for 6 years, and at first everything seemed perfect. She was beautiful, smart, and charming, everything I ever wanted. But somewhere along the way, things started to change. Small things at first. Her phone ringing at odd hours, secretive texts, and her getting defensive whenever I asked about her whereabouts. I brushed it off, convinced she was just stressed or maybe having an affair with her boss or something. But I was wrong. The real shocker came when I accidentally saw the bank statement. It was late one night when I was supposed to be asleep, and I was just checking my phone. I saw an alert pop up on our joint account. It was a transfer of $250, $0, more than half of our savings, made to an account I'd never seen before. I froze. My stomach sank. I looked closer and saw the account was in her name and the transaction was made just a couple of days ago. I couldn't believe it. I felt sick. I kept digging through the statements and I noticed a pattern of small transactions, hotel charges, restaurant bills, and some mysterious cash withdrawals. All in her name, all in the last few weeks. My mind started racing. Who was she with? What was she doing? I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. The next day I decided to confront her. I asked her about the money calmly at first. I laid out the facts, showed her the bank statements. Her reaction was instant. She scoffed, rolled her eyes, and said I was overreacting. "It's none of your business," she snapped. "You're just paranoid. Maybe you're the one cheating, not me." That was a slap in the face. I told her I knew she was lying, that I had proof. She just smirked and said I was crazy, that she'd never do something so stupid, but I knew better. I could see it in her eyes. She was lying and she was hiding something big. The way she avoided eye contact, the nervous fidgeting, the way she snapped at me for questioning her, it all pointed to guilt. I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and deep sadness. How could she do this? Not only cheat on me with my best friend, but also steal $250,000 from us. That's when I realized this wasn't just about infidelity, it was about betrayal on every level. I couldn't sleep that night. My head was spinning with questions and rage. I started thinking about everything, the good times, the bad times, the lies, the secrets. I wondered how long she'd been planning this, how she had managed to keep it hidden. My mind kept circling back to the money, what she was planning to do with it, how she was planning to run away with him. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, and I knew I had to do something. I had to figure out what her next move was, and I had to prepare myself for what was coming. But here's the thing, deep down, I already knew this wasn't just about the money or even the affair. It was about respect, trust, and who we were as a couple. And I was starting to realize that maybe I'd been blind for too long. Maybe I'd ignored the warning signs, convinced myself everything was fine when it was really falling apart behind the scenes. The worst part, knowing that she was probably lying to me even now, spinning her stories, trying to make me out to be the bad guy, I decided I'd wait, watch her, gather more evidence, and then confront her again. But I also knew one thing for sure, I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Not without a fight. Not without making her see how much she'd hurt me, how much she'd betrayed everything we'd built. I still loved her, at least I think I did, but love wasn't enough anymore. Not when it was stained with lies and theft. That night I sat in the dark, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything. I kept asking myself, how did it come to this? How did the woman I loved turn into someone capable of cheating, lying, and stealing $500,000? I didn't have an answer yet, but I knew I'd find out. And I knew deep down that my next move would change everything. The next few days were a whirlwind of thoughts. I couldn't focus at work, and every time I looked at Lisa, I saw a stranger. She was acting normal, smiling, joking, even pretending to be the perfect wife, while I was slowly unraveling inside. I kept replaying everything in my head. The late nights she claimed were work-related, the secretive phone calls, the way she'd snap at me if I dared to ask questions. Now I knew those weren't innocent. They were part of her cover-up, her lies to hide what she was really doing. I decided I needed to get more concrete evidence. I started monitoring her phone, her bank transactions, even her whereabouts. I installed a GPS tracker on her car, which felt invasive, but I convinced myself it was necessary. I needed to know exactly who she was with, where she was going, and what her plans were. Every day, I watched her slip further into her web of lies. She'd go out shopping but come back late, smelling like perfume I didn't recognize. She'd get calls whispering, then quickly hang up when I entered the room. It was obvious she was hiding something, and I was determined to catch her in the act. One evening, I followed her to a downtown hotel. She got out of her car looking nervous, clutching her purse tightly. I parked a few blocks away and watched her check into a room. That's when I saw him, Mark, my supposed best friend. They embraced, kissed, and went into the room together. My stomach dropped. My best friend, my wife, all at the same time. I felt like I'd been punched again, only this time it was worse because I knew I'd been betrayed on every front. I didn't storm in right away. I needed a plan. Instead, I took photos, recorded their voices from the hallway, whatever I could gather without blowing my cover. I knew I had to have irrefutable proof before I confronted her. I also needed to think about my next move carefully. This wasn't just about catching her cheating anymore. It was about the money, the lies, and the betrayal that went so much deeper. When I finally confronted her about the hotel, she lied so convincingly I almost believed her at first. She said Mark was just a business associate, that they were working on a project together. She called me paranoid, said I was imagining things, that I was overreacting because I was insecure. I was furious. How could she lie so effortlessly? How could she pretend she wasn't cheating on me with my best friend? It was like I was living in some twisted nightmare and I couldn't wake up. I told her I knew the truth. I showed her the pictures, the recordings. Her face went pale for a moment, then she just scoffed again. "You're crazy," she spat. "You think I'd cheat on you with Mark? That's ridiculous. You're just jealous." That's when I realized she was good at lying, better than I'd ever given her credit for. She was a professional manipulator, twisting everything to make me look like the bad guy. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not anymore. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt betrayed, humiliated, angry, and heartbroken all at once. How could the woman I loved and trusted so deeply turn into someone capable of this? How could Mark, my best friend, do this to me? I kept replaying all the good times, questioning whether any of it was real. I felt like I was losing my mind. Every moment I wondered if I'd missed the signs, if I'd been blind to her secret life. But I also knew I couldn't keep going like this. I had to decide what I would do next. The evidence was piling up. I had the proof of her affair, the evidence of her planning to run away, and the bank transactions showing she was preparing to leave everything behind. My instinct was to confront her again, but this time with a clear plan. I wanted her to see that I wasn't just some fool who got duped. I was determined to hold her accountable, no matter how much it hurt. I kept thinking about the money, how she'd stolen it, how she'd planned to escape with Mark and start over. I couldn't let her do that. I had to stop her somehow. I started looking into legal options, talking to a lawyer about how to freeze the accounts, how to protect what was ours. I knew she was planning something big and I had to be ready. I also knew that confronting her directly might cause her to run even faster, so I had to be cautious. I was caught in a storm of emotions: anger, betrayal, sadness, and a desperate need for justice. I realized that this wasn't just about the money or the affair. It was about respect and honesty, and she had shattered both. I was starting to see that our marriage was beyond saving, but I wasn't going down without a fight. I owed it to myself to find out the full truth, to make her face the consequences of her actions, and to reclaim whatever dignity I had left. Over the next few days, I threw myself into action. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in financial crimes and infidelity. The more I learned, the clearer it became that Lisa wasn't just cheating. She was planning to disappear with Mark and that huge chunk of our savings. I couldn't believe how cold and calculated she'd become. The woman I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone who was willing to throw everything away for a new life with her lover. While I was trying to piece everything together legally, I also kept a close eye on her. I knew she was nervous, maybe even paranoid. That's why I installed a hidden camera in the living room, just in case she slipped up. It was a gamble, but I needed proof she was planning to leave. Sure enough, one night, I caught her on camera talking on the phone, making arrangements to meet Mark again. She was so casual, so dismissive, acting like she was just talking about groceries or some stupid nonsense. But I knew better. I saw her look around nervously like she was worried about being caught. That moment was a slap in the face. I realized she'd been lying to me, manipulating me, and planning her escape right under my nose. The betrayal cut so deep I could barely breathe. I felt this intense mixture of rage and heartbreak. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to make her see how much she'd hurt me, but I held back. I knew I had to stay calm, gather more evidence, and get ready for the confrontation I knew was coming. I also started digging into her financials more thoroughly. I hired a private investigator to look into her recent transactions, her whereabouts, and even her social media activity. Turns out she'd been in contact with Mark for months. They'd been planning this for a while, saving money, hiding cash, even opening secret accounts. The more I uncovered, the angrier I got. How could she be so manipulative? How could she betray me, our marriage, and everything we built over something so reckless? One thing that kept gnawing at me was the money. I kept asking myself, where was she planning to go? Who was she planning to run to? I knew she'd been talking about leaving the country, maybe going to Europe or somewhere she could start fresh. She'd always wanted adventure, but I never thought she'd be willing to destroy us for it. That $250, $0 was supposed to be our future, our house, our kids' college fund, our retirement. And now she was planning to blow it all just to run away with Mark. I couldn't let that happen. I had to stop her before she left, before she took everything and disappeared forever. I started working with my lawyer on putting a freeze on our joint accounts and filing for an emergency hearing. I wanted her to be caught off guard, to realize I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Meanwhile, I kept confronting her about her lies, pushing her to admit what she was up to. But she was good, too good. She'd deny everything, throw out lies, blame me for being paranoid, say I was just jealous or insecure. I saw through her, though. I knew the truth. One night, I decided to confront her directly. I sat her down and told her I had enough. I told her I knew about her affair, her plans to run away, and the stolen money. I told her I wasn't going to sit around and let her destroy everything we had. I asked her point blank what her real plan was. She looked me in the eyes and said, "You're overreacting. You're just jealous because I don't want to be married to a paranoid loser like you." That was her way of twisting everything, making me look like the crazy one. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I knew her game. The emotional toll was getting worse, every time I saw her smirk or dismiss my concerns, I felt like I was losing my mind. I'd loved this woman. I'd trusted her with everything. And now I was starting to see her for who she really was, a selfish, manipulative liar who was willing to ruin us all for her own selfish reasons. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I realized I had to take control to protect what was left of my life and my dignity. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let her run. I was going to fight for what was ours, our money, our marriage, our future. I knew she might try to leave anyway, but I was prepared. I'd already started the legal process, and I was ready to go to court if I had to. I wasn't going to let her just walk away with my life savings and my best friend's betrayal hanging over my head. I had to be strong. I had to stand my ground. Because if I didn't, I'd lose everything. My trust, my peace, and possibly the woman I once loved. The legal preparations took up most of my days. I met with my lawyer multiple times, going over every detail, every transaction, every lie I'd uncovered. We filed for an emergency injunction to freeze the accounts, and I made sure to get a court order to prevent Lisa from leaving the state, or even the country, without my knowledge. I knew she was planning to escape, and I needed to cut her off before she could disappear with Mark and that stolen money. The more I pushed forward, the more I realized just how deep her deception ran. Meanwhile, Lisa's behavior grew more erratic. She was constantly on edge, snapping at me over minor things, trying to act innocent but failing miserably. Her eyes darted around like she was afraid I'd catch her in her lies. One day, I found her trying to delete text messages on her phone, something she'd never done before. I calmly took her phone and looked through her recent messages. Sure enough, there were dozens of texts between her and Mark, talking about their plans, their secret meetings, and how they'd escape together. Seeing that, I felt a surge of anger I hadn't fully processed yet. I confronted her again, this time more directly. I told her I knew everything, the affair, the money, her plans to run. She looked at me with that dismissive smirk and said, "You're crazy, you're just jealous. Mark and I," she paused, "we're just friends. You're making a big deal out of nothing." I lost it for a moment. I told her I wasn't stupid, that I had proof. I told her I was done being played. That's when she finally snapped back, accusing me of controlling her, of being paranoid, and of trying to ruin her life. That night I felt a mixture of exhaustion and resolve. I knew I couldn't trust her anymore, not even a little bit. I also knew I had to get everything in order to prevent her from slipping away. I reached out to the bank again, made sure the accounts were frozen, and reinforced the court orders. I also contacted a private investigator I'd hired to keep tabs on her movements. The Pies reports confirmed what I suspected. Lisa was actively trying to plan her escape, making arrangements, withdrawing cash secretly, and even talking about changing her identity. The betrayal hit harder than ever. I thought about our life together, the promises we made, the dreams we shared. All of it was crumbling, and I felt powerless, like I was fighting a losing battle. But I refused to give up. I couldn't let her walk away with everything. I loved her, or at least I thought I did, but more than that, I loved the life we built. And I wasn't going to let her destroy it just because she was unhappy or wanted a new thrill with Mark. One day, I decided I'd confront her again, knowing full well she might try to run or lie her way out of it. I sat her down, looked her straight in the eyes, and told her I knew about the affair, the money, and her plans to leave. I told her if she wanted to leave, she'd have to do it legally, with all the consequences on her head. Her face twisted into a sneer, and she spat back, "You're just a jealous, insecure loser. You don't own me." That was the moment I realized she'd become someone I no longer recognized, someone manipulative, selfish, and willing to destroy everything for her own selfish gains. I felt a strange sense of clarity amid the chaos. I knew I had to be strong. I had to hold on to what little dignity I had left. I didn't want her to think she could manipulate her way out of this. I wanted her to see that I was serious, that I wasn't going to let her walk away with our money, our life, and my trust. I started preparing myself emotionally, reading about how to handle betrayal, how to protect myself legally, and how to stay sane through it all. Deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. I was fighting not just for the money or the marriage, but for my own sense of self-worth. I'd been, yes, but I refused to let her win. I was determined to see this through, no matter how painful it would be. I had to face the reality that the woman I loved was gone, replaced by someone else entirely, someone who cared only about herself and her new life with Mark. But I also knew I had to keep fighting, to protect what was mine, to hold her accountable, and to reclaim my life from the wreckage she'd caused. The court date arrived faster than I expected, and I was a mess of nerves and anger. I'd spent nights staring at the ceiling, replaying every lie, every betrayal, every stolen dollar. My lawyer had already prepared the paperwork to freeze her assets, prevent her from leaving the state, and start the process of dividing what was ours. I knew Lisa wasn't going to go down without a fight. She'd been planning her escape for weeks, maybe months, but I was ready. Or at least I told myself I was. On the day of the hearing, she showed up looking even more smug than usual, trying to act like she had everything under control. She had her own lawyer, of course, and they were throwing accusations left and right. She claimed I was paranoid, that I was trying to control her, that the money was nothing, and that her affair was just a mistake she was trying to fix. She lied with such ease I almost believed her for a moment. But I knew better. I had the evidence, photos, recordings, bank statements, and I was prepared to show the court everything. The judge listened carefully, flipping through the documents I presented, and then looked directly at Lisa. I could see the tension in her face, the nervous flicker in her eyes. The court granted the injunction, freezing her assets and preventing her from leaving the state. That was a huge relief, but I knew she'd try to find a way around it. I also got a court order for her to submit her financial records, which she fought fiercely against, trying to hide her secret accounts and cash withdrawals. While all this was happening, I kept thinking about the bigger picture. This wasn't just about money. It was about respect, trust, and the betrayal of everything I thought we had. I saw her in court trying to spin her lies, and I realized I'd underestimated her. She was good at deception, better than I'd ever imagined. But I also saw her desperation, her attempts to manipulate the system, to make me look like the bad guy. It was clear she was willing to do anything to escape the consequences. After the hearing, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because I'd taken the first step in stopping her from running away with our money, but dread because I knew she was still planning something. I also felt a strange emptiness, like I'd lost a part of myself I'd never get back. All the love, all the trust was gone. Now it was just me fighting to protect what little I had left. In the days that followed, I continued gathering evidence. I worked with my lawyer to prepare for the next phase, filing for divorce, claiming my rights to the money, and making sure she couldn't pull any more tricks. I also kept close tabs on her movements. She was trying to act normal, but I could see the cracks in her facade. She'd become more aggressive, more defensive, and her lies grew more obvious. She'd deny everything, accuse me of being the crazy one, and try to turn everyone against me. One night I caught her trying to pack a bag. She was sneaking around the house, looking for things to take. I confronted her and she burst into tears, claiming she was just leaving temporarily to think things over. But I knew better. She was trying to pack her escape route, to take whatever she could before I could stop her. I forced her to sit down and told her she wasn't going anywhere, that I had the court orders, that she was under investigation, and that I was going to make sure she paid for everything she'd done. That moment was a turning point. I realized I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I had to be firm, even if it meant breaking her down emotionally. I told her I still loved her, but I couldn't trust her anymore, that her lies had destroyed what little marriage we had left. She looked at me with pure hatred, saying I was the worst husband in the world, that I was controlling and insecure. But I knew better. I knew that I was the one trying to hold onto what was left of our life, while she was the one trying to destroy it. The emotional toll was massive. I'd gone from loving husband to someone who felt betrayed and used. Every day was a battle between hope and despair, between love and anger. But I also knew I had to keep fighting for myself, for my future. I couldn't let her win, not this time. I had to be stronger, smarter, more determined. I'd lost a lot, but I wasn't going to lose everything. I'd come too far to give up now. As I sat there, staring at her crying and pleading, I realized something else. This wasn't just about her cheating or stealing money. It was about respect, respect I'd given her and that she'd thrown away. And if I was going to rebuild my life, I had to accept that some things were beyond repair. I had to accept that I might never get her back, that I might never understand why she did this. But I also knew I had to move on, stronger, wiser, and more cautious than ever before. Because at the end of the day, I was fighting for my dignity, and I refused to let her take that from me. The final court hearing was a blur of emotions. I sat there, watching as Lisa's lawyer tried every tactic to downplay her actions, claiming she was misunderstood, that she was overwhelmed, that her affair was just a moment of weakness. But I had the evidence, the proof of her betrayal, her lies, her theft. The court saw through her act. The judge granted the divorce, awarded me full custody of the house, and ordered Lisa to pay back every cent she stole, plus interest. It wasn't just about punishing her. It was about making her understand that actions have consequences. As she was handed the court documents, her face twisted with rage and frustration. She spat some final insults, trying to shame me, but I felt nothing but relief. Relief that I had finally taken back control of my life. I watched her walk out of the courtroom, her head high but her eyes filled with fury. I knew this wasn't the end. Her pride wouldn't let her just walk away quietly, but I also knew I'd done everything I could. In the weeks that followed, I worked hard to rebuild myself. I focused on my career, my friends, and my own mental health. I started therapy, not just to get over the betrayal, but to understand how I'd let things get so far. I realized I'd been too trusting, too blind to the signs, and I promised myself I'd never let that happen again. I also took steps to secure my financial future, changing passwords, setting up protections, and consulting with financial advisors to ensure I wouldn't be vulnerable again. One of the hardest parts was facing the aftermath, seeing Lisa's name in the papers, hearing rumors, and knowing she was trying to spin her story to make herself the victim, but I refused to let her manipulate my emotions anymore. I knew the truth, and that was enough. I also took a hard look at myself and what I wanted moving forward. I realized I deserved honesty, respect, and someone who wouldn't betray me for a moment of selfish pleasure. Looking back, I've learned some tough lessons. Trust is fragile, and betrayal cuts deep. But I also learned that even in the darkest moments, you can find a way out. You can reclaim your life, your dignity, and your happiness. It's not easy and it hurts like hell, but it's worth it. I've come to accept that some relationships are beyond repair, and that sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away and start fresh. Now, I focus on healing and moving forward. I know I'll never forget what happened, but I refuse to let it define me. I've learned to be more cautious, more aware, and more protective of myself. Most importantly, I've learned that no matter how much someone betrays you, you have the power to rebuild and find peace again. To anyone reading this, who's going through something similar, trust me, you're stronger than you think. Don't let betrayal destroy you. Get the evidence, stand your ground, and don't be afraid to fight for what's right. Because at the end of the day, your happiness and integrity are what matter most. And no matter how dark things seem, there's always a way to find the light again.